Hello everybody, in this video I'm going to be doing a brief stock analysis on Beyond Meat, and this is not by any means going to be any kind of deep dive into their financials, but more so me just giving my opinion on the company as well as the outlook for the industry. And before I even take a look at the stock, I just wanted to show this quick statistic. So this is really recent, the study just finished in May 2nd of this year, but plant-based meat since the lockdown began is already up 264%, as well as some other various things such as canned food or canned meat, as well as dried beans, and some other various things are down. And just aside from the pandemic, Beyond Meat as well as other plant-based meats are doing really well in their growth, and I think once they can successfully be profitable in the US, they're going to be really a worldwide phenomenon and continue to grow in popularity. And now actually taking a look at the stock, I'd like to begin looking at the 5-year chart to kind of give more of a long-term growth perspective, but they've only been on the market for a year and a couple of months. So taking a look at that chart, the stock skyrocketed after it opened at around $60, and it went all the way up to $240, where everybody was hearing about it when it went above $200. Nobody could believe it. And then the stock finally pulled back to around $60. And then in March of this year, when the overall market was way down, it went all the way down to $45. But the stock has already rebounded all the way up to $131, as you see here. And then here's just kind of a more in-depth view of the year-to-date chart to kind of help illustrate that. At the beginning of the year, around $75, and then went down to $48 in March. And then we're recently, in the last couple of months, up to about $170 again, which is pretty crazy. And then, as I said, back down to $131. Their revenue has doubled, or even from 2018 to 2019, tripled, and their earnings are getting better and better each year as well. And here you can see in Q1 of 2020, they were actually profitable. So once they can actually become profitable and make substantial profits for a few quarters, I think this stock is going to really blow up, and they will be able to expand a lot more than they are right now. Even though they've been really successful in getting together with fast food restaurants and whatnot, it's going to be really great to see international growth. And then in Q2 of 2020, you're seeing negative earnings again, and pretty big negative earnings actually, at negative 10 million. And a lot of manufacturers are just having to change the way they do things, and they actually had to close plants down for a little bit. So that's part of the reason you're seeing such negative earnings in Q2 of this year. And then I also wanted to talk about a few points by the bears and the bulls by analysts at Morningstar. The first positive point is that plant-based meats should continue to grow rapidly, and you hear about the Impossible Burger or the Beyond Meat Burger at just about any major chain now. And I think especially here in the US, but in Europe and Asia as well, as animal cruelty becomes more and more well known, vegetarianism is becoming more and more popular, and it has been for probably decades. So people who don't eat meat or want to try and eat less real meat will continue to buy more and more plant-based meats. And then the second point is talking about their first mover advantage, and they weren't the first to make a plant-based meat, but they were the first to do it in a really big, successful way, along with the Impossible Foods or the Impossible Burger. And they were the first to become public, which is giving them a huge advantage in the stock market. Even if another were to join now, that would hurt Beyond Meat because they would lose some of their investors to Impossible Foods, for example. But it's going to help them become much more well-established long-term for sure. And then this last point is the strongest and probably the biggest one. It's that we think Beyond Meat is most likely the plant-based meat supplier to secure a US deal with McDonald's, which they sell more burgers for McDonald's than anywhere else in the US, so that would be a huge deal. And Impossible Foods has already said they don't have the capacity for it. I don't even think they have half the capacity for it. So Beyond Meat doesn't either, but they're much closer than Impossible Foods, so they're going to definitely increase their revenue with a deal like that. And I also wanted to talk on a few of the negative points by analysts at Morningstar, and the first one is that the competitive landscape in the plant-based meat market is set to intensify significantly. If you think back just 5 years, plant-based meats were really not well talked about and really thought of as something that's really weird and out there, but now there's some really big players with Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat, so even if there's some more small players in the market, I don't think it's going to significantly hurt them. And then the second point, I don't know if I necessarily agree with. It's that close to half of Beyond Meat's 2019 revenue comes from the food service channel, which has been severely affected, which is absolutely true, but that's kind of a short-term thing. Most restaurants are already back and open to normal capacity. Things are changed, obviously, but that's more of a short-term thing, and it's not really going to affect them for the long term. So it won't really affect you if you're a long-term investor. And then just this last one, I also don't know if I necessarily agree with. It's that consumers have been shifting away from products with long ingredient lists, which I do agree with, but I don't know if that really applies to the plant-based meats. If people are buying snacks or cereal, they don't want to look on the box and see that there's 20 scientific names for the ingredients that they can't even pronounce. But with Beyond Meat, I think you kind of have to expect that just because, it's not coming from an animal. So it's got to have some, scientific ingredient sounding names in there. And then just the last thing I wanted to do is take a look at the research report overview. They were given 1 out of 5 stars, which is not quite as bad as it sounds because they don't take into account the amount of growth that I think this industry is going to see. So that's pretty much the entire reason they're given 1 out of 5 stars. They also don't say it has any kind of economic moat, and I think they have a pretty well established brand, and they have way more capacity than their competitors. So I would say that gives them a narrow economic moat right there. Uncertainty is high, which I would say I do agree with, just because if they can't reach profitability in the next few quarters, that is definitely going to hurt them. And then lastly, stewardship standard. I suppose I don't really know much about their top management, so I would agree with that. In my opinion, it's a pretty great long-term position to have if you do want to hold it for 5 or more years, just because this is such a growing category. I make tons of other brief stock analysis videos very similar to this one, so be sure to come and check those out. Subscribe for more content, and thank you so much for watching.